Morning. Good morning, good morning, good morning. I am Tamara Johnson Sheely. Good morning. It is Friday, the 23rd. It is August 23rd. Can you believe we are like almost like Christmas will be here before we know it? Good morning. I don't know where my trusty co-host is this morning. I am a bit nervous, but I do have Mr. Chris Larson here with me to hold down the fort until David gets on. Good morning, Chris.
Yo, what's up? What's up?
Good
Peace to
morning.
the family.
Peace. Good morning. It looks like you got a little sunshine in your face too, just like I
got
do.
a little sunshine. Got that good glow, that good healthy sunshine for your skin.
That's vitamin D, right? Is that
It is.
vitamin
It
D?
is. I need that. I need that energy. I need that energy. We people of the sun, right? So
It's good for us. It's good. It's just a reflection. I don't know if everybody can see you well. You gotta, yeah, there you go.
let me see if I can get out of there.
Yeah, there you go. There you go, right there.
There you go.
Good morning. Good morning. ADOS California is in the house. ADOS nationwide. The African descendants of slavery. I always, for some reason, want to say American. African descendants of slavery. Nationwide movement.
Chris. Oh, it is American though. It is American.
It is American. It is
yes,
American.
Yes.
And we are American. We
right.
Chris, I was actually doing some calculations just this morning. It was just in my spirit. 1619, the first slaves arrived. This was what, August 20th? This
month. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So 1619, the first slaves. 1865 when we freed the slaves, quote unquote. Yes, freed the slaves. 246 years there, right? Then we had not until 1964 when we had the Civil Rights Act that with Jim Crow. So it's like another 99 years. And I did the math. This was like in my spirit this morning. So I did the math. So that was a total of 345 years this country has benefited off the labor of African people. And then I thought to myself, I turned 47, Chris, on this past Wednesday.
Oh, okay. Happy birthday.
Thank you. 1964 until this present day of 2019, 55 years. I'm 47 years old. I am the first one in my family to receive a bachelor's degree.
Yeah.
So that shows you how we as a people, just my lineage alone, we are so far behind where the country is, and why reparations is a conversation that we are not going to let go of.
Yeah, no, you're right. And so you make a great point. There's actually a couple of great graphics that the movement, the hashtag ADOS movement, uses to sort of in pictures say what you just said, right? We had 250 years of bondage, followed by another 100 years of other kinds of bondage, and then the last 50 years of another kind of bondage, right? So, it's something that we call accrued disadvantage. I'm not sure if
I haven't heard that term.
About that term or that phrase. So accrued disadvantage is a way to talk about the sum of all of what you said and how we live with it right now as ADOS, as American descendants of slavery. So not just the bondage for the 250 years, but then the failed Reconstruction, the robbing of the Freedmen's Bank, the sharecropping, the tenant farming, the convict leasing, the contract deeds, the
redlining,
the Jim Crow New Deal, the Jim Crow legislation of the period after the First World War, the KKK, the Second World War, the KKK, the lynchings, the plunder, just all of that combined, added together, and within us now, we bear the trauma, we bear the fruits of that accrued disadvantage, and that may be, if it's not the core rationale for why reparations is necessary, it's one of the core rationales for why reparations is necessary.
And we're not going to let this generation of us, we get it. Yeah. And we get it intellectually. It's like you can see this. Like you see it. We see the years, we see the systemic things that have happened to us, and we're not going to let it go.
Yeah, no, we're not. We're not letting it go. Generally, the hashtag ADOS case for reparations concentrates on 3 different time periods, and you just actually laid them out really, really well. It's that period of slavery. It's the period post slavery leading up into the late 1960s, and then it's the period post 1960s to now. The case for reparations is based on that continuum of experience for American descendants of slavery. And it's one of, and I don't want to be redundant, but it's one of the core reasons, the core rationales for why reparations is necessary. It's not something that we talk about in terms of, well, it would be nice to have, or it's something that, we should or could do, if we blah, 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 blah. No, this is something that's absolutely necessary. When you talk about accrued disadvantage, you also have to talk about the trajectory. So the accrued disadvantage talks about the past, but what does the future hold, right? If you are living with this built up in you for hundreds of years, what does your future hold? Well, we know from lots of different evidence, lots of different data, right? ADOS wealth, American descendants of slavery wealth, typically will be $0.00 by mid-century, 2049 to 2053. That's what the data says. But between 2019 and 2020, ADOS wealth is going to drop by 5%. Between 2019 and 2024, ADOS wealth is going to drop by 10%. And by 2053, ADOS wealth will have dropped by $1,700. Right now, it is $1,700 typically. So that means by the middle of the century, ADOS wealth will be typically 0. That's unacceptable, especially for a group that built the country during those during that first 250 years. What the hell were we doing? We were building America. During that during that 100 years post slavery, what the hell were we doing? We were building America. Right? And what have we been doing now? We've been continuing to build America. So let me stop there.
Yeah, but income and wealth is 2 different things. And I think I think we have to explain to people that, you may have an income that's incoming to you now, but wealth was something that you can pass on to the next generation. You can't pass along your income. So I want people to, and I think that's where the disillusion is, Chris. So many people that think they've made it, or they're making it, it's this thing where I'm all right, I'm good, I'm getting mine, getting that bag, as they say, I'm getting that bag. But if you're not getting that bag and you're creating some sort of generational wealth, it's nothing.
And it can't just be you getting the bag. So one thing that we talk about in the ADOS movement is about the collective. We're very collective focused. So we realize and we advocate that wealth is a community property. It belongs to communities. It doesn't belong to individuals themselves. But let me take a step back, actually. You raised a good point. Let's take a look at what we mean by wealth, and let's take a look at where we are in terms of wealth. So I just mentioned that, typically the typical ADOS household has a wealth or net worth of about $1,700. When I say wealth or net worth, what I'm specifically talking about is the difference in value in what a household owns minus what that household owes. So it's your household.
Say that again. Owes and owns.
Right. So when I say wealth, and when we talk about wealth in the ADOS movement, what we're specifically talking about is the value of what a household owns minus the value of what that household owes. So it's household assets minus household debts. Okay, that's what we mean when we say wealth or net worth or net assets. That's what ADOS advocates are talking about. And if you look at typical wealth for an ADOS household right now, it's about $1,700 liquid. If you compare that to the typical white household, it's about $117,000 liquid. So it's about a 10 times difference. But if you look at places like Miami, the typical ADOS household has about $11 in net worth, $11 in wealth. If you look at Boston, it's about $8. If you look at Los Angeles, it's about $200. Wealth, as you also pointed out very rightly, is more important than income. And it's not to be confused with income. Wealth is the single most consequential factor in your well-being. Wealth is also the most important indicator of structural racism. And it also happens to be the best lens through which we can view the legacy of slavery. I like to say that the legacy of slavery actually lives within the wealth gap, and the wealth gap is just the difference in the levels of wealth between, let's say, ADOS and whites.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And this is the education that, you know, I have a lot of hard conversations. Honestly, as strange as this is probably going to sound, but I think most people who know me here locally in Georgia know that, you know, I have these hard conversations with white people. And I think this is where they have to understand that reparations, like you just said, is necessary. It's necessary for them. It's necessary not just for our survival, but for their survival as well.
Yeah. So we have to. So we have to reckon with the fact that we've never, as a nation, actually done the job of repairing ADOS for the damage and the harm that was done. One of the core principles of any reparations plan that ADOS advocates talk about is to take ADOS right now from a total national wealth of about $2 to $3 trillion. So right now, you know, there's some 94 to $100 trillion of private wealth in the country right now. Okay, white Americans own some 90% of that. Of the 100 or so, 9,400 or so trillion dollars of total national private wealth, ADOS control about 2% of that pie. Of that 2%, to be quite honest, most of that is held by boomers or people very close to Black baby boomers. So there's really no working age ADOS wealth. One of the core principles of the hashtag ADOS case for reparations is to take ADOS from $2 to $3 trillion in national wealth to a minimum, I want to stress this, as to a minimum of $13 to $14 trillion of national wealth. If a reparations plan does not do that, then it has not accomplished one of the goals, at least within the ADOS case for reparations.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Exactly. And I'm gonna take this again back to white America because they really need to understand that what has happened to us over these hundreds of years and what is continuing to happen. And we are, you know, we're pushing as hard as we are because we are witnessing our own demise. Yeah. Like we know that we are like, we're living in our own demise, and that's why we're pushing as hard as we are. But we, you know, talking to white America and white people about reparations, they have to see that it is good for all of America, because they think that if they give us something, I guess we're going to take over. You know.
So and this is where this is where we need, and this is where we want to make use of, you know, our white allies, to be quite honest. Mm-hmm. It is the job, if you ask me, it is the job of non-ADOS allies. If you call yourself an ally, it's your job, if you ask me, to be having these same kinds of hard conversations with people in your own communities. So it's not enough for me to be out there making the case, fighting hard for reparations and other things that would be good for ADOS. The allies have to get involved. The allies have to get more active. The allies have to get more intense with their advocacy and really having these really hard conversations with their own family, and make these conversations mean something, and not just their own families, but their own communities, and also make these conversations mean something. You know, make other people in your communities know that it's serious, that you're serious about this fight, and that you're serious about the consequences of us not winning this fight. You know, it's not good for ADOS, and it's not good for America in general for the people who are responsible for building the country to hit zero wealth within the middle of the century. It's unacceptable, right? It's bad for ADOS specifically, and importantly, it's also bad for America in general. And we need the white allies, the non-ADOS allies, some of the Black immigrant allies, some of the Latino allies, some of the others to step up, step in, and have these conversations with your own people, right? I tend to say, right, what is the definition of what we might call supremacy or anti-Black, racism, right? I like to say that anybody who's not working to overthrow this system of anti-Black racism, of anti-ADOS racism, and anyone who's not working on to change the system, is practicing anti-Black racism, is practicing white supremacy. And so we need those who think of themselves as good people, as good Americans, as on the side of justice, as on the side of ADOS, to step up and step into this fight.
Yeah, I'm going to post a comment.
Yeah.
She says, oh, they're aware they don't give a damn and think it's a handout when it's a debt owed.
Yeah, that's what you hear. So, I've heard this. We've all heard this, right? And it's to talk about reparations in terms of handouts is very disrespectful, to be quite honest, right? It's not a handout, it's a debt. You owe a debt. When your landlord comes for the rent, he's not asking for a handout. When the banker comes and calls the loan, he's not asking for a handout, right? When you got to pay your phone, the phone company's not asking for a handout. They're asking for the money that you owe them, right? That's what we're saying. The money and everything else is owed, and it's an absolute debt. Also, to talk about it's also a strategic choice and a political choice to talk about reparations in terms of being a handout, right? Because it plays on a very old stereotype that ADOS are lazy, living on the government, and want handouts.
Okay,
right?
that lazy word it pisses me off.
Yeah.
When I look at pictures of my ancestors in the field from sun up to sundown, and only having Sundays, probably, and working us like we were animals, and you have the audacity to say that we were lazy. So I had to jump in there, Chris, because every time I hear that, or when I hear people, even today ever say that, I'm like, do you know what you've done to us? Do you know what you have is off the free labor of Black people, of ADOS in this country? Yeah.
No, you're right. And so, but it's a very old stereotype, but it's a political choice to talk about reparations in terms of being a handout, because it plays on a very old stereotype that ADOS are lazy, living on welfare, want the government to take care of us, and are looking for handouts. And the extension of that is, well, what are you going to do when we give you this handout? Well, then you're going to go, you're going to go buy a bunch of, things that aren't good for you, right? And so that's an extension. That's actually an extension of that kind of stereotype. That's a political choice, right? Those who don't want to see reparations happen choose to use that language, and we've got to be those of us who are fighting for reparations for American descendants of slavery have to be very steadfast and very tough in pushing back against that kind of, quite frankly, racist rhetoric.
Absolutely, it is. Absolutely, it is. I think about equality back in the 60s, how we equal rights, equality. Now that I think, like I say, this generation, we get this on a whole nother level. Equality will never help us. It is not about equality. We must have equity. We got to have equity in this.
Well, that's that's part of the reason why one of the core principles of the hashtag ADOS case for reparations is to take ADOS from right now controlling about $2 to $3 trillion in national wealth to, at minimum, $13 to $14 trillion. That's a kind of equity, right? That at the bare minimum, our level of wealth will reflect, at the bare minimum, our level of population in the country. Now, that's a bare minimum, right? Because if you look at the full debt, estimates range from 15, 17, 20 trillion dollars, right? So and that's and that's a total cost, right? It would be broken out into different kinds of restitution, but total price tag 15, 17, 20 trillion dollars. So that would be a form of equity as well. And reparations, to be quite honest, is a form of equity. It is repairing damage that has been done. Actually, let me give a basic definition of reparations here too.
Before you do that, let me post this one comment, then I want you to come back to that. So I wonder if the fear is that handouts to us will put us in power positions to do to them what they have done to us.
Yeah, it's fear. It is absolutely fear. And shout out to Kelvin. It is absolutely fear. It's a little bit more than fear though too, right? It's about power. Okay. So this ultimately is about power and wealth, right? And there is fear. There's always been fear of ADOS for a number of different reasons. Quite frankly though, that is not going to stop ADOS from making this case, fighting this case, and actually winning this case. Right now, since the last time we talked, which I think was about a month ago, I think the last time we talked, we did the broadcast with Travis down in Houston, one of the ADOS advocates, boots on the ground in Houston. Travis is a great example, but there are other examples as well of folks all over the country right now fighting, advocating, showing up at public events for politicians, doing community organizing, showing up and having legislative visits and doing legislative advocacy. There's all kinds of community organizing, direct action, and legislative advocacy happening right now. Since the last time we talked, there's quite honestly been an explosion of boots on the ground, fighting, making this case, and making the point that we're not giving this up, that this is something that our generation and the generations to follow will be fighting for and winning soon.
Yeah, we're not. This will be my fight.
Yeah.
This will be my fight.
Yeah. And I'm with you on that. I feel like personally, I found my life's work. I've been organizing independently myself personally for about 10 years on a number of different issues, 10, 12 years, but I've been active since I was a teenager. I've been politically active since I was a kid. And, I'm honestly having the time of my life, okay, to be quite honest. Not that this fight doesn't bring its ups and its downs and its frustrations and its joys, but I don't want to be fighting for anything else. I actually feel like we're in the third or fourth iteration of the civil rights movement right now. The first was to get the 14th Amendment and the abolition and all that stuff, right? And then the second part of the civil rights movement was during the 1960s. So the first one, had some effect, but wasn't complete. The second one in the 60s, 1960s had some effect, but wasn't complete. I think we're in the third iteration of that civil rights movement right now. We may just not know it yet.
Oh, we know it. I feel it. I'm excited about it. Like I am. I'm really excited about it. I didn't, I just want to thank you, Chris, because, I didn't know about this. I've been, I watched you and I'm like, what is this? We're over here in Georgia. You're all the way in California.
Yeah.
And you and I have been Facebook friends for quite a while, and I've been watching you, and I'm, after I ran in 2018, and then we started this broadcast, and I was still watching you. I still wasn't clear about what it was, but when you brought it to me and you started explaining it to me, it felt right. It's like so many things about Georgia specifically clicked with what you're working on, what's happening across this country with this whole movement, and what you brought to me. It's like, and I'm like, damn it, we just finding out.
Yeah.
We just finding out over here in Georgia.
Yeah. So, Georgia has a great history of, political activism, and Georgia's been, the center of a lot of what's going on, not just Atlanta either, right? There's all all different places in Georgia that have been really awesome. You've been an amazing candidate and an amazing force down in Georgia as well, and really a force for good. But that's what makes this movement even more powerful, if you ask me, because it empowers people, everyday ADOS, politically where they are. That's good for America. Okay, just to be quite honest with you, you've got right now thousands, tens of thousands, soon to be hundreds of thousands of ADOS who, many of whom haven't been politically engaged in a way like this, some in their life, some in a long time. That's powerful in and of itself, right? Because if ADOS aren't engaged in politics, engaged in government, then it's going to be tough to win a political and government fight, right?
But let me tell you, let me jump right in there, Chris. Let me tell you what's inspiring about this new generation of ADOS candidates. We're not coming to this like, oh, we're going to get on the side of one party or the other.
Right.
We're saying it is about ADOS. It is about these systemic changes. Like we're coming in here to play politics. Like we're not playing checkers. We're playing chess.
Yeah, and we're playing the whole.
So that's the part
that
I get. Yes, we're playing the whole board. We're not just making these one moves, trying to get, no, we're playing the whole game, and we're gonna play to win. Either you're gonna do what we want, or on the heels of when things didn't pan out here in Georgia, God gave me this withhold the vote, and I really didn't understand it at the moment, but I knew it was something that I needed to activate, and I did. I've stayed on it. And I'll still keep talking. If these elected officials and these candidates don't get on board, we will withhold our vote from them. And this movement never said anything about not voting. It says candidates and elected officials who don't have communities of color, their interests first. We're going to hold them accountable.
Yeah, it's withhold the vote for you. Yeah. So right. So and so one thing you mentioned just a minute ago, the fact that ADOS politics. So I say, and I take this from Yvette Carnell, who is a co-founder of the movement. Her and Antonio Moore, they coined the acronym ADOS sometime over the last couple of years. Yvette has a show called Breaking Brown that many of us have been for 3 years, two times a week for 2 hours, have been doing political class, basically, and political science class with Yvette twice a week for 2 hours for 3 years. One thing she said this week that I thought, so she said this year. She said, ADOS is the future of Black politics. Okay, I think that's true. She also said, and this was this week though, she said that, I'm going to the voting booth no matter what, right? What I do when I get there depends on you.
Oh, I love it. I love it. That was on
Monday's show, I think. What I do when I get there depends on you. Now, let me tell you, in 2020, I've got a race for mayor. I've got a race for city council here. We've got school boards coming up in 2020. We've got, California State Assembly people, California Senate senators. We've got, we've got a bunch of things to be politically engaged on and politically active on. We got a bunch of ballot initiatives, right? Right. So, and then we've also got people running for Congress, right? Every member of the House of Representatives is also up for re-election in 2020, right? 34 senators up for re-election in 2020. So, I've got a lot of work to do, right? People are also running for president in 2020. So what we're telling candidates is you need to have an agenda specifically targeted to ADOS, okay, that actually gets the job done. It needs to include reparations if you're a presidential candidate. We're politically independent and moving towards political independence, which means that no longer is it okay just to put a D next to your name and expect me to vote for you. Okay.
Don't make me jump out of my seat, Chris. Okay. Don't make me jump out of because that's exactly how I feel. Just because that D is behind your name does not mean you automatically get my vote. It does not. And we're that generation that's saying, hell no to that.
Yeah. And the
Oh, I
Democrats
love it.
need to pay attention, right? So, no candidate has
Mhm.
won the Democratic nomination for president without winning a majority of the ADOS vote since 1982. In
Mhm.
2016, 1 in every 4 Democratic primary voters was ADOS. And in 2020, it's going to be a minimum of 1 in every 4 Democratic primary voters. But if you look at, for example, South Carolina, right, 60% of the votes in the Democratic primary in 2016 were ADOS. So the Democratic Party has to pay special attention, right?
Mhm.
Because
Mhm.
we've contributed to the Democratic Party. We've kept the Democratic Party, quite frankly, afloat.
Mhm.
The Democratic Party owes ADOS,
Mhm.
and the Democratic Party is going to have to come to ADOS with an agenda before 2020. If not,
We will withhold that vote.
if not,
Period.
like I said, yeah, right. Like I said, I'm gonna go to the voting booth. I'm gonna go to the polls. Or we don't have polls here in California anymore. We actually have voting centers, but or we have voting drop boxes. But that's another story. So I'm gonna be voting. It's just what I'm voting for and who I'm voting for depends on what you do between now and come time for the election. And time is running out.
Oh yeah, and we're not asking anymore. Like I'm at a place, Chris, where I'm not asking anymore. I'm demanding that you come to the table with a specific agenda, with some not talking points. Because I'm gonna tell you, candidates are great for this. Now they can give you some beautiful, elaborate, intellectual words, and they can give you, or they can give you a song and dance, Chris, and it sounds good. But we got to be more. We got to be. They got to be specific. You're gonna have to come to the table with some tangibles.
Yeah, with the intangibles. Now, so a good example of what you just said is on this reparations question. Presidential candidates, instead of addressing the question of do you think ADOS are owed trillions of dollars in reparations, and do you think this will need to be specifically for ADOS? Instead of answering that question directly, candidates have tried to use a lot of those other words, like you were saying, but also they've been trying to say, yeah, I support, HR 40 as a way to answer that question. Now, HR 40 can be useful. It is very flawed, and it needs to be amended in a serious way. And there are a bunch of suggestions for amendments to it. But that's not answering the question of do you support reparations for ADOS, right? And you've also got candidates also trying to say, yeah, I support reparations. Here's my reparations, something for everybody. Okay. So you right. And now, we know from the data that universal policies don't solve race-specific problems.
Close the income the wealth gap.
No,
it does not close it.
Right. And so it doesn't accomplish one of our core goals, right? Which we said earlier, right? One of the core goals of any reparations plan needs to be that you take ADOS from at minimum the $2 to $3 trillion in wealth right now to at minimum $13 to $14 trillion. So that's one of our core goals, and to say otherwise violates one of those core goals. So you've seen candidates try to say, hey, this is reparations. It's something, it's universal basic income, or it's a LIFT act, or that's Senator Kamala Harris's plan, or it's a 10-20-30, which Bernie Sanders keeps referencing in relation to a Jim Clyburn plan, right? Or it's something else, right? Or it's something else. No, we're talking specifically about a set of compensatory policies that compensate this group for a grievous injustice, this specific group.
But I can tell you,
That's
Chris, I can tell you, go ahead, finish, because I want to tell you that. Go ahead, finish. I was going to say I was going to tell you, in politics, Chris, anytime you talk specifically about Black people, doing something for Black people, do you know that is like, you are shunned. Like if you bring up Black anything, it goes back to Representative Lucy McBath here in Georgia, in my district, in my neighboring district, who won't sign on to HR 40 because of its because it's black. It is something that in politics, it will get you out of there.
Yeah, and that's so.
I know.
You're right. You're right about that. And party, quite honestly, should be ashamed of themselves, right? Because at least at the national level, right? Because this group ADOS, we've voted Democrat consistently for 50, 60 years, right? There's no justification. There's no good reason for Democrats not to be talking specifically to Black voters. It's a sign of political disrespect. And to be quite honest, they don't have that rationale with regard to any other group. Every other group can have a specific plan specifically for them. This week, we saw a bunch of folks doing a bunch of Native American-based plans. It's great, but where's the ADOS specific plan, right? Mm-hmm. Where is that? And why does it take us, pulling you by your teeth, kicking, punching, and screaming to be able to get that kind of plan from you?
Yeah. Egberto.
I see you're on the subject again.
Hey, good morning, brother.
How you doing, my brother Chris Logson, that I don't know, but I'm pleased to meet you, sir.
Yes, sir. Good to see you again.
Egberto, when he has to come into these conversations, Chris, I think he's just like, damn.
I didn't know this was going to be a subject again. But I just sort of heard the tail end of what Brother Lodson was saying, and I want to get in and say that while I sympathize with a whole lot of that, my brother, I think we have to kind of, in my opinion, that is, we have to kind of put blame where the blame lies. And I think the blame doesn't lie with, I honestly don't think the blame lies particularly with the Democratic Party as an institution, in as much as it lies with the Black people within the Democratic Party itself. That is, when I say Black people, I should say Black Americans within the Democratic Party itself. And what I mean by that, sir, is that if you take a look at the CBC, the Congressional Black Caucus, and you take a look at all these organizations, they have been some of the, they have a level of elitism within them, within the group, that look at the masses of Black people as just that. Now, folks like myself, who Tamara is always happy to say I'm not an ADOS, even though I fight for the cause all of the times. Let me tell you, we are not the ones that are looking at our American brothers and sisters as from an elitist point of view. We are the ones that have been fighting. I think it's the dissension within the African American group that really is a problem. Why the Democratic Party acts the way it does, and not those of us from the outside, the Black folks that came from the Caribbean or Latin America or Africa or whatever. I think in a lot of ways we get the ire from some of the African Americans for things that African Americans are doing to them. Oprah Winfrey, all these folks that have made it out, but didn't go ahead and say, I am really giving back to the community. Where is Oprah's voice against Donald Trump, her buddy? Where is her voice against Donald Trump? Another billionaire, they're billionaire friends, right? Where is her voice? Why do we see Kanye and all these guys being a part of the Trump institution, being a part of these elitist folk, and not a part of saying, okay, let's go. I mean, at least Magic Johnson went ahead and put the plutocracy in the places where we were. But I don't see the others doing it. So that's my point. That's my concern with the ADOS movement. It's not focusing where I think it needs to focus.
I can agree with the fact that so when you bring up the fact that the CBC, and not just the CBC, but
NAACP.
Groups like the NAACP, groups like the Urban League. Quite honestly, we found out, right now, this week we found out that the CEO, I think, of Comcast is on the board of the Urban League, but Comcast is involved in a Supreme Court case against Byron Allen. right?
Alan, yes.
And you know, they're using an 1866 civil rights law to, you know, to push it, right? So and the CBC has been absolutely horrible. Okay, just want to say that openly and publicly. You know, the CBC has been absolutely horrible when it has come to advocating on behalf of ADOS, right? So you're absolutely right that there is a big problem. Let's just keep it real. That there's a big problem with what is supposed to be our civil society organizations that advocate for us, and what's supposed to be our political organizations that advocate for us have failed miserably. Okay. And we have seen the results of that, not just in bad politics, right? But the results of that bad politics is the fact that ADOS wealth is on the way to zero. Okay. So we see that is absolutely the case. It's also the case that the ADOS movement has been very, very much focused on the power structure, right? Most of the fire, most of the energy has been actually directed to the power structure. And I think a lot of the backlash that we've seen has been from the power structure. So I would slightly disagree there that, you know, the focus has been on, you know, maybe Black immigrants or maybe non-ADOS. The focus actually has been on the power structure. It's just the reality that the power structure is also using these other groups to hurt ADOS. Okay, that's also a point that we make, right? And willingly or unwillingly, right, the power structure is also using ADOS, using these other groups to hurt ADOS.
Can I ask you a
So
question?
been on us who are yes.
Okay. That part concerned me, right? Here in Houston, we are a 33 kind of city. What it means is, like, we are roughly, it's not exact, but like it's a third white, it's a third African American, it's a third Latino. That's the kind of city we have, right? But the power structure in this city is, even though it has a Black mayor, is white, right? And what the way they do things is they have the Latinos and the Blacks fighting for crumbs, and, you know, each of them trying to man up the other one or woman up the other one. I was just getting politically incorrect for a minute. You know, the other one, right? So that you have the Latinos and Black folk fighting for the crumbs that are left. I kind of look at when I look at the fission or fissure that I see with and it just irks me that I see with the African Americans and the let's call it the ADOS and the non-ADOS. When I see that friction, that is how I look at it, right? In other words, I don't think non-ADOS are coming here looking for reparations, but when you have, and this is not coming from neither Tamara nor you, because I hear you talk and there was nothing that you said that offended me, right? But when you go online, because some of the narrative that you use is, well, folks like, let's say, the Caribbean folks or the Latino Black folks are taking up these spots in the universities and at the expense of the ADOS. That shouldn't be the issue, right?
Why not?
The issue shouldn't be that these because it's not only the Caribbean immigrants that came over here that are paying those fees to those schools, right? Now, the issue is the school using foreigners that are not white to meet your quota.
Yeah.
The issue should be that you're not fighting that we shouldn't get in. You should fight that we shouldn't be counted as the ADOS folks. It's a difference. And what happens is a lot of.
So we should be fighting that, not that. So say that last part.
Here's the issue. The issue. Let's use me as an example. I went to the University of Texas. Okay. I went there as a foreigner before I became a U.S. citizen. I went as a foreigner. Okay. Now, when the count comes in, that the University of Texas use me on their Black quota, if there's some Black quota, what you as ADOS should have been fighting there is that, no, I'm a foreigner. That doesn't go towards the Black quota. But what
Yeah.
a lot of folks see the ADOS as doing is saying like, oh, don't give this particular foreigner the same opportunity that that white foreigner has. Because when the foreigner comes and they go to a university out here, they compete on the same level as any other foreigner that's coming in. When ADOS goes out there and says, well, look, that black foreigner is occupying my space, that is saying you want us as black foreigners to compete on a different level than the white foreigners that's going into that university. I'm saying we should be teaming up to say, no, any foreigner that comes into the United States is just that, a foreigner or an immigrant or whatever. And that does not count against what is owed to ADOS.
So that would be good, except for the fact that you're also competing with ADOS, you or whoever the other black.
No. You missed my point then.
You're also competing with ADOS, right?
You missed my point then. If you say that, you missed my point. My point is the law is what allows the count, okay? Mm-hmm. The law is what allows the count. A foreigner, an immigrant should not be in the count. And then we are not competitive.
So what you're saying, so let me see if I understand you, Egberto. You're saying that there should be three categories. There's this white, there's this ADOS specific, and then there's this foreign category versus having the black foreigners be incorporated with the ADOS, which is given a false sense that there's these black numbers that really aren't black.
I'll make it even simpler. Here's what that would do also, right? Let's say the university is racist. Then what the university will do is, hey, well, since we can't count those black foreigners, we may just have to have less black foreigners coming in. But that has nothing to do with you guys. That has stuff with the foreigners to then go ahead and say, hey, you guys are being racist in the way you bring foreigners in. But the real discussion for Americans now should be, look, ADOS, the people that when we're talking about, if we're forcing quotas, right? If we're forcing quotas in universities, etc., the people that should be counted are ADOS. If you're not ADOS, that doesn't go against the quota. And that is what's more honest than creating a fight. Because what happened is you're going to the fighting for crumbs kind of a thing again, right? Where you're putting natural allies against each other. And that's what they do.
For crumbs. So, no, it's not fighting for crumbs, though. No. So, like, So, fighting for our rightful place, fighting for what's owed to us is not fighting for crumbs, right? So, it's definitely not fighting for hard-won positions. So like the price for ADOS going to the University of Texas isn't the price of the tuition. It's the price of the 250 years that we started talking about in the beginning. It's the price of the 100 years after that. It's the price of the 50 years after that. So it's not fighting for it's not fighting for crumbs. What I will agree with you on, though, is the fact that you're absolutely right. There's no reason to count an immigrant from the Caribbean as ADOS on an admissions to satisfy the quota. That's been the argument. That's actually on the ADOS 101 website. That is absolutely the case. And it's not just for education, it's for affirmative action, it's for any other policy and program that's supposed to be specifically for ADOS. Now, I do want to say one thing though about so yes, you're gonna find online, you're gonna find people with all different types of opinions. ADOS is not an organization. It's not a membership group where you can join and not join. We are a lineage. We are a people. There's 35 million of us. So absolutely, you're gonna find a different kind of opinion and a range of opinions all across the internet, right? It's the internet, right? So I would suggest taking a look at what people like Yvette Carnell, Antonio Moore are talking about. Take a look at what the other ideas are on this, and you'll find that actually the fight and the fire has actually been to do exactly what you said, to make sure that ADOS are not being counted among Black immigrants, not just on this level either, but also at the level of the census as well. One of the things that we're fighting for is a separate category on the census for ADOS. That's absolutely the case. It's also the case that, what we don't want is, and what we would rather from good allies, is that you not tell us what we should be doing or that what we're supposed to be doing. We have a particular fight that we need allies to be supportive of. Being supportive doesn't necessarily mean that you try to steer us in your direction. Doesn't mean that you can't give constructive criticism. Obviously, no one is above constructive, but from good allies, what we need are who support the fight in the best way that they know how, and actually do what we talked about earlier, which is talk to some of the other Caribbean immigrants, talk to some of the other immigrants who are Black, and get them to support this case also.
So what I think I'm hearing from Egberto is a policy change. Like there needs to be some sort of policy change. And actually, Cheryl actually said that just a second ago. Is that right,
Yeah,
Egberto?
yes, you're correct. But
Yeah.
I mean, I understand I understand the ally thing, but I want to correct one thing, Chris. You misunderstood when I'm talking about crumbs. I would never assume what is owed is crumbs. What is given is crumbs or crumbs. Okay, there's a difference. In other words, what I'm saying is we fight for crumbs. We don't go for what we are owed or what is owed us. It's the same thing in Houston when I made that argument. We are fighting for crumbs instead of going to where the real problem is. As far as allies are concerned, I am an ally, but let me tell you something. It's hard to be an ally when the concept is wrong. And what I mean by the concept is wrong is just what I mentioned about what a lot of I know what the internet looks like online, what happens online. I understand that. But within your 101 document, I think it's 101 where I read it, if you imply the narrative that an immigrant, a Black immigrant, is taking a spot of an ADOS.
That's true, though. That's absolutely true.
Let me hold on a second, my brother. A Black immigrant is not taking the spot of an ADOS. That is America. Okay. In other words, what I'm saying, the fight is, and I would be. It's
absolutely true.
Let me finish.
That there are ADOS, that there are Black immigrants who are in positions that should be ADOS. Let
me finish. Let me finish this. Okay. Black immigrants, when they come in as foreigners, okay, as let's say I'm using the schools as the example, okay. When we're using the schools as examples, we come in as foreigners, okay. That the United States government decide to count the Black Jamaican or the Black Panamanian or whatever on account on ADOS is not the fault of the Black immigrant. And not only it's not the fault of the Black immigrant, it is a false when the ADOS movement looks at the Black immigrant and says, well, you're taking a spot that really belongs to us. That is exactly how the plutocracy works and exactly how the plutocracy keeps power. Because what it does is
it's a statement of fact. We can do two things at once.
I gotta finish. It makes us fight against each other. And you talk about we want to be allies. I am your ally and I understand where it's coming from. But an average person that doesn't have the wherewithal, okay, they're going to look at it and they're going to say, well, to hell with it. You should see the interview that I did with a Jamaican guy yesterday that I played. He looked and he said, well, where the hell were them when Bustamante was doing his work, when Farrakhan was doing his work? I don't remember anybody saying, stay out of the ADOS movement and stop trying to defend our rights, because that is for us to do. And all these are foreigners, Farrakhan, everybody else, right? So, I mean, the thing about it is nobody says that. I am an ally and I tolerate a whole lot of the negative because, well, I understand. But the truth of the matter is it's not the fault of the Black immigrant, that it is the fault of African Americans that have allowed their leaders to do what they do. They elect the same guys over and over again.
There's actually blame on all pieces here. It's not just that the CBC and the NAACP and the Urban League have been failing miserably for many generations. It's not for many decades. It's not just that it's the American government itself that has been using other groups against ADOS. It's also the fact that these other groups have been participating in being used. It's absolutely the case. That's absolutely true.
Please tell me, give me an example of an immigrant participating in being used.
Well, you have the case of there's the actress Mindy Kaling, her brother. There's a very famous story of how he impersonated an African American,
right,
affirmative action, and get into, I think it was Harvard or Columbia or one of these other Ivy League universities.
Yes, I remember
that's
that
a concrete
case.
example. That's a concrete example of somebody participating. Now,
I agree, but let me tell you the difference.
Where is the Black immigrant?
You're right. You're right.
Advocacy saying, hey, we don't belong in affirmative action spots. This goes to ADOS. Where is that group? Where is that group doing that?
I'm not going to dispute that. I can't dispute when you're
okay.
right.
So,
okay, when you're right, you're right. But here's the deal: these are individual cases. You have white people who have done the same thing to impersonate Black folk as well.
Right, and that's exactly my point. It's not just the white folks,
but that's a human thing.
ADOS folks, you're absolutely right, and you asked for a specific example, but I want to know, where is the organized Black immigrant advocacy group that is saying, only give ADOS affirmative action. We don't want these spots. We don't deserve these spots. We didn't fight for these spots. These are ADOS spots. Where is the group that is an African immigrant political advocacy group, that is a Caribbean immigrant advocacy group? Where is that group that's doing the advocacy right now?
I don't see what the truth of the matter is that, that I don't know how to say this kindly. I really don't. That mentality about that is not your spot is not the right thing to say, because the spot is, look, this stuff about this spot thing is not the right question.
It is
the right
spot.
Question is,
we paid with blood.
It is again. You see, that's the thing. That's a crumb mentality that I'm talking about.
It's not the spot. What we bought with blood are not crumbs.
It's expanding the pie. Okay, it's taking away the pie. That is what we're supposed to do.
We want the piece that's a separate project. We want the piece that we bled for, and we're willing to do whatever it takes to get the piece that we bled for. That's not crumbs. Trust me.
You see, the same piece that Caribbean person has is the same piece that white American has, is the same piece that Latino American has, and everything else. And that's what I'm trying to tell you. It's reframing the debate that's necessary. Yeah. Because what happens is, as long as you keep that debate in frame.
ADOS has zero.
No, let me finish. Look, no. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying, as long as you are fighting, you're saying you're fighting for a spot, then they own you. When you stop saying you're fighting for a spot and you start fighting for what is yours.
We're fighting for what we're owed. We're fighting for what we're owed. And part of what we're owed,
I agree with that.
A lot of places in many of these universities who themselves sold slaves, right? We had Georgetown, right?
Immigrant is holding your spot.
Who was actually selling slaves.
No immigrant is holding your spot. The immigrant has, no immigrant, and that's what I'm saying. When you talk about it as spot,
that's
this
actually
is my
correct. Spot. There are Black immigrants who are beneficiaries of parts of affirmative action. That's absolutely true.
But
so we're at the top of the hour. Look, this I'm Egberto. You always step into this, Chris. I love you, dude. Like, this conversation must be ongoing. We will do this again. We're at the top of the hour, y'all. I'm not sure where David is. I am very worried. He was supposed to be on the broadcast today, so I am actually going to go to his house if he doesn't answer the phone. So.
Can I thank Chris for a good discussion?
Yes,
absolutely, Egberto.
Thank you,
Chris. Look, I think these are the discussions that we are supposed to have. I'm not going to agree with you on that. I'm going to try to pull you over sometime. I'm saying meet somewhere where we can do it, because I think we have to.
Yeah.
The interaction has to change somewhat.
I think that's true. I think you're right about that. Absolutely.
So thank you for the discussion.
Yeah.
You do, and right. Yeah, no, and it's gonna be a process, and this is new. This is in our this movement is in its infancy, right? So it's gonna take time for us to come to a good accord and move forward together. We could use our allies in this fight, but we're gonna fight this fight no matter what.
Yeah.
Well, look,
all
like
right,
I said,
let's stay there.
Right on.
You can find Mr. Egberto Willies Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Periscope. This dude is everywhere. politicsdoneright.com. Egberto Willies. Mr. Chris Larson, tell everybody where they can find you out on the West Coast. Isn't that sunny California?
I'm here in Sacramento. If you're in the Sacramento area, we're having our next meetup for ADOS here in Sacramento, September 21st, I think it is. Saturday, September 21st. And I'm all over the internet. So yeah, Chris. Chris
Larson. Again, I am Tamara Johnson Shealy. And Chris, this morning, you should have corrected me when I had David on my mind. So it is the American descendants of slavery.
Yeah, right on. Yeah.
I do know that. Look, correct me when I'm not right. Like my brain was like all over the place, but ADOS, 100% in, whatever it takes. Egberto, we will see you next week. Let me go find my trusty co-host, David. You can always find him and Acknowledge the Divide right here on Facebook. I am Tamara Johnson Shealy. See you guys on next week, Friday, same time, same channel.
Thank you.
Thank you.